Look, first of all, the people who are part of this Trump coalition had no problem at all running to district courts and getting nationwide injunctions against the Biden administration immigration policies. And you can specifically refer to Greg Abbott in Texas, who ran to one district court down in the Southern District of Texas, which was very open to these things, and they issued nationwide injunctions all the time. This is how this goes. This is not judges out of power or exercising too much power. There's a simple mechanism when there's an injunction. You ask for an emergency hearing before the Circuit Court of Appeals and ultimately possibly the U.S. Supreme Court, and you can overturn that injunction if you can ask those judges and impress upon those judges that you should have that injunction overturned. It's just the way the system works. They just don't happen to like it because Donald Trump is getting a lot of these injunctions issued because his positions are constitutionally very bad. So, that's just the law. And now they're complaining about the referee. They're getting the call against him and they're spending all the time complaining about the referee. That's all that's going on here.
Well, is the referee's life about to change here, Robert? Because it's pretty clear that impeaching judges will not be the answer. And it's interesting, Darrell Issa in this hearing had Newt Gingrich, in fact, testifying, the former speaker. They call these resolutions to impeach judges political symbols, not legislative symbols. This is legislation and could be important for judges going forward. If it passes, what will be the impact?
Yeah. First of all, on the question of an impeachment, our country does not impeach judges because we don't like their rulings. That precedent was established during the impeachment trial of Samuel Chase in 1805. And even his political opponents, including Aaron Burr, voted not to convict him on articles of impeachment in the United States Senate because they believed in the principle that you do not attack judges for their rulings. You can impeach a judge if he's, for instance, taking bribes or something like that, but not for their rulings. Now, on the question of limiting a court's jurisdiction, the Constitution at the start of Article 3 says that the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in the Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish, which means that the Congress could presumably get rid of district courts and circuit courts of appeal because they have that power. Limiting the jurisdiction is also a possibility, but that's a double-edged sword because next time when they want an injunction against a Democratic president, that power will now be gone because they've gotten rid of it. So, those injunctions serve a useful purpose. What it says is, hey, put everything on hold until we have a chance to hear the merits of your case, because if we don't put it on hold, then somebody's position or somebody's interest will be destroyed by the passage of too much time and the continuing unconstitutional actions. So, yeah, I suppose that Congress could do that. They could limit the courts, but if you limit the courts, where are you going to prosecute all these people you're saying are illegal aliens, et cetera, if you don't have those courts to do it?
Well, so when we consider the courts and the people who make arguments in them, Robert, what do you consider the greater threat here in terms of the kind of narratives we are seeing? Is it around the actual judges who interpret the law and hand down decisions, or around what we're seeing when it comes to some of the highest powered law firms that are being targeted by the administration, firms that would be bringing these cases to these judges in the first place?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's what they're doing is they're trying to make a chilling effect on good district judges who are just doing their job. They're saying, we're going to make your life difficult for just doing your job. And that's not the way the Constitution is supposed to work. Regarding attacking these law firms, this is absolutely really just beyond what should be going on. This is really absurd. And all the law firms are doing, they're taking a position, that's fair enough, but they're presenting it in court. What you're basically doing by attacking these law firms is saying, we don't want you to have a lawyer so that you can have your day in court. We just want to go forward with dictatorial powers and take away all of your resources and pro bono work or even the lawyers you hire, because we're going to attack your lawyers if your lawyers dare to take a stand against our administration and our regime. That's what's going on, and that's just really scary about what this Trump administration wants to do. Once you start attacking people's lawyers, that should tell you that your legal position is bad, and you might want to think about a new legal position.
Robert McWhirter, I want to ask you about a couple of the cases that have been identified following the deportations of alleged gang members that brought us, at least in one case here, to a call for a judge to be impeached, remembering that these alleged Venezuelan gang members were put on an airplane under the Alien Enemies Act and sent out of the country. That judge that Kayleigh mentioned called for the plane to be turned around. The White House did not acknowledge that, and it went on to El Salvador. A lot of other flights have gone to El Salvador, including one on Sunday night. The administration not using the Alien Enemies Act, in fact, calling it a counterterrorism operation, Robert. 17 alleged gang members to El Salvador. They were from both El Salvador and Venezuela. And there were a couple of cases that have been called out since then. In one case, a man from Maryland who was deported, according to the administration, because of an administrative error in the U.S. legally. His name, Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, you might hear about him. Another professional makeup artist by the name of Andre Jose Hernandez Romero, whose lawyer says that the tattoos that were identified to be gang tattoos, in fact, were tributes to his family. He identifies as gay. Both are said to possibly be in this maximum security prison in El Salvador for no reason. Robert, what happens to them?
Well, they could be in great danger. They may have had political asylum or whatever reason. At the very least, the American taxpayers are going to be on the hook for a huge civil judgment. Once they're determined to actually have legal status or even be citizens, the American taxpayer is going to have to pay these judgments out, because this is just a total bungle on the part of the administration. And, let's not forget, they don't say who these folks are. They allege they're Venezuelan gang members. They allege they're part of Tren de Agua, but they don't know. And as I've said before, what's to stop this Trump regime from going in and grabbing me or you and saying to the public, we're part of Tren de Agua, and sending us down to El Salvador? I at least speak Spanish, but hey, that could be terrible. And what's the mechanism, due process rights, that we should have as American citizens, or even as undocumented persons have, to actually push back on that and say, hey, I'm not even a member of the gang, much less anything else, or should be actually deported. This is a way of handling immigration law. And by the way, now they're talking about not the Alien Enemies Act, because that's a weak ground. If you truly are a member of a gang and have a criminal past, you can be deported under the immigration statutes anyway. You put them in deportation proceedings, there's a process, and you can deport people normally. This is all for show, and a lot of people are going to be hurt and maybe killed, and the American taxpayers ultimately are going to pay out millions of dollars in judgments because of the incompetence of this administration.
Well, Robert, you alluded to there the use of the Alien Enemies Act. There's also a question around the use of the Emergency Economic Powers Act when it comes to tariffs, which was supposed to be a live issue in the Senate today. As there was going to be a vote on Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia's resolution to end that emergency declaration when it comes to Canada. Due to the filibustering of Senator Cory Booker, it looks like that may be put off until tomorrow. But that aside, the fundamental question here, Robert, is whether or not this actually is authorized use of this authority for the president, these emergency economic powers, or if it is acting in defiance of the Article 1 constitutional responsibility of Congress to be the one deciding tariff policy.
Oh, I think that's absolutely the situation. It is acting in defiance. The question is whether Congress, and specifically the Republican majority, will get a backbone and start asserting their own authority and prerogatives under Article 1 of the Constitution. The Constitution was designed to have a balance of powers between the branches of government. And what has happened is parties sometimes circumvent that, but this has very much occurred here. And the Congress, under Article 1, are not exercising not only their power, their responsibility to be a check on the president. This idea of using this terrorism narrative, look, there are members of Tren de Agua that need to be deported from this country. Nobody argues that. Nobody argues about the deportation of violent criminals from this country. That's not the issue. Once you start using a terrorism designation, doesn't that kind of weaken actually fighting terrorists? I mean, let's not forget, 9/11 was a real failure of our kind of screening system in immigration law. And that's what these statutes were focused on doing. And then branching this out as a justification for terrorists to create a tariff war and expanding what you believe are your presidential powers is just not what the Constitution allows. And Congress needs to assert its own prerogatives and authority under the Constitution.